Because there are so many possible ways to differentiate instruction, it provides flexibility to teachers as well as to students. I think that many teachers feel that the rise of state standards has taken away some of the creativity associated with the art of teaching. However, I think it's important to keep in mind that standards tell us what to teach, not how to teach, and we have many choices to make and opportunities to get creative as we differentiate our instruction. It can certainly require a great deal of creativity as we consider how to challenge very high ability students or how to draw on musical intelligence in our classrooms. There are too many strategies and models for differentiating instruction to include in one course, and really no teacher will ever be able to need to use every possible strategy or model. But it's useful to see a range of strategies as you begin learning about differentiated instruction. Raft assignments are a great way to differentiate writing prompts and other assignments based on readiness, learning profile, or interest, and they're fun to design. Raft is an acronym for Role, Audience, Format, Topic. When designing Raft assignments, teachers ask themselves, what are all the different roles my students can take on regarding this topic or this text? Who might the audience be for their work? What formats can their work be presented in? And finally, what content can they address that is vital to this topic or this text? After reading and discussing The Great Kapok Tree by Lynn Cherry, a book that looks at the possible destruction of the Amazon rainforest through rainforest animals' eyes, we might ask students to create a short speech to be delivered to people around the world explaining why the rainforest should not be destroyed. This assignment is relatively simple as the animals in the story lay out very clear reasons for preserving the rainforest. Also, this assignment asks the students to use their own words rather than to consider how someone else might communicate the ideas from the story. We can certainly tinker with the format if we have students who would not be comfortable with creating a speech, and this would be a good way to incorporate learning profile differences. However, on the whole, this particular Raft assignment is probably not a big enough challenge for many students reading this book. A step up might be to ask students to take on the roles of two or more of the rainforest animals, having a conversation about why they like where they live. Here, students are required to say things as the animals might say them, and they've got to combine the different ideas into a hopefully coherent conversation. Also, they have the added challenge of needing to greatly rephrase the animals' lines in the book. These students have slightly more to consider as they create their products, making this assignment more complex than the first. Another step up might be to ask students to take on the role of the tree. How would the tree talk? What would it really want to say? The tree would create a list of ideas for the rainforest animals about why depending on one another is a good thing. Here's where the real challenge comes in. Students completing this particular assignment need to understand the concept of interdependence, making this assignment more abstract than the first two. In this example, each assignment provides an increase in challenge for students while requiring all students to communicate their understandings from the book. Thus, these Raft assignments are tiered or readiness-based. As mentioned in the previous video, when tiering or differentiating based on readiness, it's a good idea to choose the appropriate assignments for your students. Otherwise, there's no way to ensure they'll be properly challenged. So it's clear that Raft assignments can be used to address differences in student readiness levels, but they can also be used to address learning profile differences. Toward the end of a study of the solar system, students might be asked to create different products as part of a final assessment for the unit. Some might choose to assume the role of a comet that has traveled through space and is explaining what it's seen in the form of a timeline. In terms of multiple intelligences, this particular format, the timeline, would appeal to logical mathematical learners. Other students might prefer to write a letter from one planet to another planet, explaining which is the better of the two and why. Verbal linguistics students who like to write would probably gravitate toward this option. Still, other students might want to write a song based on a well-known tune that explains information about the solar system to younger students. This option would, of course, appeal to musical students. Because the Raft assignments in this example are based on learning profile differences, students would be able to pick the product of their choosing, and in the process of completing their preferred products, all would be synthesizing information learned during their study of the solar system. Complex instruction is another great strategy for addressing learning profile differences. It offers teachers a way to mix learning profiles in small groups and ensure that all group members are engaged and contributing. Basically, this strategy asks teachers to consider the different strengths or learning profiles their students possess. For instance, are some students great researchers? Are others capable of expressing themselves most effectively through diagrams or illustrations? Are some highly creative in their thinking? Do some students have talent in writing or visualization? When thinking about your students' particular characteristics, the sky's the limit. The next step is to decide which characteristics to use and to group students so that each group has the same ones represented. Thus, each group might have a writer, a researcher, a creative thinker, an illustrator, and so on. Next, you design a task for each strength or learning profile, something that would appeal to a student having that particular strength. Students work in their mixed groups to complete the tasks assigned, and while they may be responsible as a group for all of the products, each student in the group has a task that is designed with her in mind. For example, after learning about storms as a whole group, students may be ready to create some products related to them. Their teacher decides that he wants them to work in small, mixed readiness groups on tasks that are based on their learning profiles. He could put all the verbal linguistic learners together, but there's a possibility that one or two students will end up doing the work for the whole group. So he decides to use complex instruction so that each student in his different groups will be engaged. Each group of 5 students includes an intrapersonal learner, a visual spatial learner, an interpersonal learner, a learner who likes to grapple with unanswerable or philosophical questions and concerns, and an out-of-the-box creative thinker. Their teacher allows them to work together in their groups as needed, but he also makes sure that the students are clear about which task is their ultimate responsibility. Task 1 focuses on intrapersonal learners. It asks them to reflect as they become storms and create journals of their lives from start to finish. Task 2 focuses primarily on visual spatial learners, but it would probably appeal to logical mathematical learners as well. It asks students to look for and map patterns in the paths of some famous storms. The third task, which asks students to design a lesson about storms to be used with younger students, would appeal to interpersonal students, those who like to work with others and are aware of others' feelings and needs. We all know students who enjoy pondering the seemingly unanswerable questions. These are our existentialists, and Task 4 is designed with them in mind. It asks them to consider whether or not we should try to control nature. The fifth and last task is designed for students who are creative thinkers, and they like open-endedness. It asks students to create their own storms with specific characteristics and effects. So each student in each small group completes one of these 5 tasks, and while students can certainly work together within their groups, it's important for each one to take the lead, so to speak, on a particular task. Usually, students are quick to recognize the tasks that match their learning profiles, but sometimes teachers need to step in and help groups determine who will do which task. As with all independent or small group activities, it's a good idea to allow time for closure. So after completing their STORM tasks, students can be grouped by similar learning profiles to share their varied approaches to the same tasks, or they can share their work with the whole group. Either way, this gives them a chance to highlight their work and to learn from one another. Raft assignments and complex instruction are just 2 more of the many ways a teacher can approach differentiation. Both provide a structure for designing creative and engaging activities and products, and both can certainly be linked to learning objectives. As you select strategies for differentiation, keep in mind what you're trying to do. If you need to differentiate based on readiness, tiering is a very good option. However, it's not a good choice if you want to differentiate based on learning profile or interest. In that case, you'd be better off considering other strategies, such as Raft assignments or complex instruction, or perhaps learning contracts or independent study. Your assignment before your next discussion is to try your hand at designing Raft assignments and complex instruction tasks. Be sure to consider your learning objectives as well as the basis for your differentiation.